Hello? Family called me ungrateful and selfish for not sharing my bonus. Your sister deserves it more, Dad said. I just smiled, but next week they were shocked when the bonus came on a rainy Tuesday. I remember the exact moment because I was standing by the office window, watching water streak down the glass, when the HR email landed in my inbox. The subject line said, "Congratulations." I opened it without much thought, maybe another survey or a generic recognition program, but no. It was real. A number, 6 figures long, stared back at me from the screen. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. See, I'd been the dependable one all my life. The helper. The one who said yes before the question was even finished. I was the kid who stayed behind to clean up while my sister threw tantrums and my parents coddled her. I was the one who paid their mortgage when they were between jobs, who fixed their car when they couldn't afford new tires, who funded my sister's third attempt at community college after she dropped out of the first 2. No matter what, I was always there. A call away. Wallet open. Mouth shut. So when I got the bonus, a performance award tied to a company project I had bled for, I didn't see dollar signs. I saw validation. Proof that all the quiet sacrifices hadn't been in vain. For once, something had come back to me. I felt like a man standing on the shore after years of swimming against the current that never slowed. And like a fool, I shared the news with my family. We were at dinner. A modest Italian place my mom liked. My treat, of course. I thought maybe, just maybe, this time they'd be proud. Maybe they'd say, "You deserve it." And for once, I could believe them. Instead, my father put down his fork and said, "Your sister deserves it more." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He didn't hesitate. "She's been through a lot. This could help her get back on her feet." My mother chimed in. "You shouldn't be thinking only about yourself, Aaron. You know we're all struggling. That money could really help the family." The family. It always came back to that phrase. Not love. Not gratitude. Just the family, a sacred, one-way debt I was expected to keep paying. Then came my sister, Melissa. She didn't ask. She expected. "So you're giving me something, right?" she said, like we were divvying up birthday cake. "I could really use a down payment for a new car. Mine's acting up again." She didn't even say thank you. Just launched into a monologue about needing help, how everyone else had it easier, how life had never been fair to her. I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I just smiled. A deep, still smile. The kind you wear when something inside you quietly snaps. "Sure," I said. "We'll talk." They kept eating like nothing had changed. But something had. Something big. Because while they were planning how to spend my bonus, I was already planning how to spend my future. That night, after I dropped them off, I sat in my car in the parking lot with the engine running and the rain still tapping on the windshield. I stared at my hands on the steering wheel like they belonged to someone else. My mother's words echoed in my head, "You shouldn't be thinking only about yourself." My father's, colder, "Your sister deserves it more." I kept wondering, what was it, exactly, that she had done to deserve anything from me? Melissa hadn't worked a full-time job in years. Every time life asked her to step up, she crumbled like a house made of playing cards. Yet somehow, she always landed on a cushion. And more often than not, I was the one holding it. I went home to the apartment I'd lived in for the past 7 years. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. My lease was up in 2 months, and for the first time, I didn't automatically plan to renew it. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the email again, the bonus amount glowing on the screen. It wasn't just money. It was the power to choose. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. They'd conditioned me into believing I did. That my role was to be the safety net, the invisible scaffolding holding everyone else up. But what they called support was just a prettier word for sacrifice. And what they called family was just another version of control. I scrolled through my contacts and paused on Melissa's name. I'd transferred thousands to her over the years. Rent. Groceries. Bailout money for bills she'd forgotten to pay. And every time, she promised it was the last. Then I remembered something. 3 months ago, she asked me for $600 to fix her brakes. I had wired the money. 2 weeks later, I saw an Instagram story of her at a resort in Arizona. Self-care weekend. The caption read. The brakes? Never mentioned again. That was the moment I realized I had been funding a life I wasn't even allowed to criticize. A silent investor in a story where I was never the main character. Just a wallet with a name. I shut off the screen and stood up. Something was shifting in me. The kind of shift that doesn't come with yelling, or door slams, or dramatic speeches. It comes quiet. Final. Like a door closing softly behind you. The confrontation wasn't loud. It didn't happen over a slammed door or a heated phone call. It started in the middle of my parents' living room, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, with my mother folding laundry and my father half watching a football game. Melissa was there too, scrolling on her phone like always, legs tucked under her like a queen waiting to be served. I had come over because they wanted to talk more about the bonus. As my dad put it in his text. Let's come up with a fair plan. He wrote. A plan. As if my income was a shared account. As if their daughter's inability to manage her life was my project to fix. My mom barely looked up when I walked in. We were thinking, she said, folding a towel. It'd be nice if you put some of that money toward paying off Melissa's student loans. She's been really stressed. She dropped out, I replied quietly. Melissa looked up. Wow. Rude. I didn't respond. I just sat down across from them, resting my arms on my knees. My dad turned the volume down on the game. Aaron, he said, this is a turning point for you. And for this family. You've always been lucky in your job. Now that you've been blessed with this opportunity, we think it's only right that you use it for the greater good. I let the silence stretch. He thought he was giving a sermon. He had no idea he was giving me permission. So you think, I said slowly, that my bonus isn't mine? That I owe it to you? To her? To us? My mother corrected. We're a unit. And how many years have I been funding this unit? I asked, my voice still calm. Do we keep a running total? Or does that only count when it's my turn to give? Melissa rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. You're so entitled. I shot back, and for the first time, I didn't sugarcoat it. You live like the world owes you something, and every time you mess up, they spin it into a tragedy so I can come sweep the floor. You're bitter, she said, her voice sharp now. You've always been jealous of me. Admit it. I actually laughed. Jealous? You think I envy you? My dad stood now, voice stern. That's enough. She's your sister. No, I said, rising too. She's your project. Your second chance. And I've been your insurance policy. But I'm not anymore. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the spare house key they'd given me years ago, and placed it on the coffee table. What's that supposed to mean? My mother asked, a nervous twitch in her mouth. It means I'm not coming back. Then I walked out. No yelling. No drama. Just one final moment of clarity. And in that quiet, I realized something. They'd always taught me that love meant sacrifice. But they never once asked if I had anything left to give. I drove for an hour without a destination. No music. No calls. Just the sound of tires humming against pavement, and the soft clicking of my turn signal every time I changed lanes, like a metronome pacing my thoughts. By the time I pulled into the overlook west of town, the sun was starting to sink behind the hills. I sat on the hood of my car and watched it go down, feeling that strange stillness that comes right before you step into something new. I wasn't angry anymore. That had passed. What I felt now was something deeper. Heavier. Relief. I opened my phone and pulled up the real estate app I'd been toying with for months. Places I'd saved but never thought I could afford. One stood out, a cabin in Washington state, tucked between pine trees and silence, with a porch facing a lake so still it looked like glass in the pictures. I had stared at that cabin dozens of times in the past year. It was my wallpaper, my someday dream. Now I could actually have it. That night I got to work. First, I called my realtor. I told him I was ready to sell the apartment. He was surprised. It was sudden, but said the market was in my favor. Within 48 hours, we had it listed. Next, I liquidated a few investments. Small ones I'd built over the years. I watched the numbers shift in my accounts with a sense of detachment, like I was deleting an old version of myself. Then came the ticket. One way. No return. I didn't tell anyone. Not friends. Not coworkers. I gave notice at work, citing personal reasons, and wrapped things up quietly. No going away party. No drawn-out goodbyes. I didn't need a send-off. I needed freedom. But I wasn't going to vanish without saying something, not to them. So the night before my flight, I wrote a letter. Not bitter. Not angry. Just honest. It was the first and last time I ever really told them how I felt. I left it on their doorstep with the same silence they had always met me with. Then I turned, walked to my car, and drove away for good. It wasn't long. Barely 2 pages. But it was the most honest thing I've ever written. No insults. No cheap shots. Just the truth. And sometimes, the truth cuts sharper than anything else. Mom, Dad, Melissa. I used to think loyalty meant silence. I thought being dependable meant being invisible. That if I gave enough, helped enough, swallowed enough of myself, eventually you'd see me. Appreciate me. Love me, even, on my own terms. I spent years building that version of me. The good son. The reliable one. The fixer. The fallback. The one you call when something breaks but never when something's worth celebrating. But that version of me? He doesn't exist anymore. When I told you about the bonus, I wasn't bragging. I wasn't looking for praise. I just wanted to share something good, for once, with people I thought might be happy for me. Instead, you treated it like an obligation. Like a pie that needed slicing, with none of it left for the one who earned it. Dad, you said Melissa, deserved it more. Mom, you said I wasn't thinking of the family. Melissa, you didn't ask. You demanded. That moment told me everything I needed to know. You didn't see a brother or a son. You saw a safety net. And you stopped caring how thin I was stretched, as long as I didn't break. Well, here's the thing, I did break. Quietly. Years ago. But I kept showing up anyway, because I thought that's what love was supposed to look like. But love isn't martyrdom. And family without respect is just obligation with a nicer label. This bonus, it wasn't a gift. It was a door. And I'm walking through it. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. No drama, no scenes. Just distance. I've sold the apartment. I've booked a one-way ticket. I've changed my number. You won't be able to reach me, not because I want to hurt you, but because I need to heal. And I can't do that in a place where my value is measured only by what I can give. I hope someday you look back and understand this wasn't punishment. It was self-preservation. You taught me how to give. Now I'm finally learning how to stop. Aaron. I slid the letter into a plain envelope, wrote their names across the front, and taped it to their front door late at night. No knock. No final glance. It was done. And just like that, I was free. I left just before dawn. The city was still asleep, buildings wrapped in fog, streets slick with last night's rain. I had one duffel bag, one carry-on, and nothing I didn't want to carry into my next life. No keepsakes, no family heirlooms, no. Just in case. Reminders of who I used to be. I locked the apartment door behind me and didn't look back. At the airport, I moved through security like a ghost. The ticket agent smiled, asked if I was going on vacation. I smiled back and said, something like that. The gate was nearly empty. Just a few early risers sipping coffee, scrolling through their phones, waiting to be somewhere else. I sat by the window and watched the sunrise crack the sky open with gold and orange. I remember thinking, this is what peace looks like. Not some dramatic escape. Just stillness. Space. Breath. When they called my group, I walked onto the plane feeling lighter than I had in years. The engines rumbled beneath me, the way they always do, but this time it didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. It felt like I was finally arriving. The cabin I'd bought wasn't glamorous. No granite countertops, no marble bathrooms. Just wood, windows, and quiet. Tucked into the trees beside a lake that mirrored the sky. I spent the first few days doing nothing. Waking up without alarms. Drinking coffee on the porch with birdsong instead of traffic. I didn't check emails. I didn't check in. There was no one left to check in with. The first night, I lit a fire and sat beside it with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, just listening to the logs crackle. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. No one knew where I was. And that, somehow, was the most comforting part of it all. Not being missed meant not being needed. And not being needed? It meant I was finally free to need myself. They found the letter the next morning. I know because, for a few hours, I didn't change my number. I wanted to see their first reaction, not out of spite, but closure. Like watching the credits roll after a long, heavy movie. It started with Melissa. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Followed by, "You can't seriously just vanish. Grow up." Then my father. A voicemail, his voice sharp, controlled, the way it always got when he felt embarrassed but wouldn't admit it. "You're being dramatic, Aaron. This isn't how adults handle things. Call me back. We need to talk about this." And finally my mom. A text. "We didn't mean to hurt you. Don't let one bad dinner erase your whole family." But it wasn't one dinner. It was a lifetime. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. A few hours later, I changed my number. Closed the old email account. Shut every door they'd once used to reach me. Because that's the thing about healing, it doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of no reply. And sometimes silence is the only answer they ever really earned. It's strange how quiet can feel loud when you're used to chaos. The first week without texts, calls, or last-minute emergencies felt surreal, like I'd stepped out of a movie halfway through. I kept checking my phone out of habit, forgetting that no one could reach me anymore. No guilt-laced voicemails. No sudden demands wrapped in family language. Just stillness. And then, slowly, it stopped feeling strange. The mornings became my favorite. I'd wake up to the sound of wind through the trees, no alarms, no emails asking me to cover for someone else's mistake, no requests for money with a guilt trip attached. Just coffee, the smell of pine, and long walks down to the lake with no destination. I learned to cook for myself again, simple, quiet meals that didn't need to be shared or praised. I started writing in a notebook I found buried in my duffel bag. Not about them, not really. About me. About who I was when no one needed anything from me. There were hard moments, of course. Regret would creep in sometimes, not for what I did, but for how long it took me to do it. I'd think about the version of myself that stayed too long, gave too much, lost himself trying to win affection that was never real. But those thoughts didn't last. Because every time they came, they were met by the sound of birds outside my window, or the taste of soup I made from scratch, or the feeling of walking barefoot across the wooden floors of a home that was mine. No one knew where I was. No one expected anything. And in that vacuum, without their voices defining who I was, I started to hear my own for the first time in years. It took a while for anything to reach me again. I'd shut everything down, phone number, email, even social media. But the thing about people who are used to taking? They don't give up easily when the supply runs out. About 2 months after I disappeared, I got a letter forwarded to my new address. I hadn't told anyone, but apparently my old landlord had shared a forwarding service contact as a courtesy. It was postmarked from my hometown and written in my mother's handwriting. The envelope was thick. I almost didn't open it. Inside were 7 pages. The first 3 were layered apologies. Carefully worded phrases that danced around accountability. "We didn't realize you were so unhappy. You've always been a bit sensitive. We never meant to take advantage." But it was the 4th page that made me stop. It was from Melissa. scrawled in her quick, careless script, full of crossed-out words and barely their punctuation. I don't get what your problem is. You've always had it easier than me. Mom and Dad just trusted you more. That's why they expected more. Expected. That word again. She didn't apologize. She rationalized. She didn't acknowledge the damage. She explained it away. And that told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't changed. They'd just lost access. The final pages were my dad's attempt. Cold. Measured. Legalistic. We'd like to set up a call. There's some paperwork to discuss. Things regarding the estate, should anything happen. Even now, it was business. Even now, it was control. I folded the pages neatly and dropped them in the fire that night. Watched the corners curl, the ink vanish, the weight lift again. Then I went back to my tea and the quiet rhythm of logs cracking in the hearth. I didn't need their updates. I didn't need their reasoning. I didn't need closure. I already had it. I don't think about them much anymore. Not out of anger. Just distance. Like a book I finished and quietly placed back on the shelf, one I don't need to reread to know how it ends. Sometimes, I still catch myself flinching when someone asks for help, bracing for the weight behind the words. But most days I just breathe. Deep, unhurried, guiltless. Bye-bye.